Hi everyone, this is going to be a reply to the video entitled Qualms, Assumptions, and Antinatalism. I won't even try to pronounce the username because I don't want to screw that up, so sorry. Okay, so your first claim is that the backbone of antinatalism is that life is a net negative. I would have to disagree, and I don't think that deciding answering this question whether life is net negative or net positive is essential for antinatalism at all. Life has negative in it. Life has suffering in it. Life has very intense, horrific suffering in it. It has agony in it. And regardless of how much of this negative life has, we pay attention to it and we stress on that because, first and foremost, you decide for somebody else other than yourself. In this case, procreation is deciding for somebody else. It's not that you should be allowed to create a human being if only you know that life is on balance positive than negative. You shouldn't be able to do that. You shouldn't have the right to do that. Even if there is more joy in life than there is horror. Even if horror is just, you know, even if one day it will be objectively proven, because it's not for us to decide, as I think you've said later in your video. It's not for us to decide for other people how they should feel about life and what should they consider positive and negative, and what should they consider important. That's precisely what happens when people have children. I'll get more I'll get to it later, I guess, in more details. Then you say, how often do we hear about suffering, that we pay more attention to it, it's actually more interesting. But that's another point that I think is irrelevant for my position, again, because my position is not based on the net thing at all. My position is based on the imposing of harm in whatever the quantity on another human being, on the child, on the future child, the future person, and what right do we have to do that in any amount. So here you're just again trying to say that we somehow overrate the value of suffering, and we underestimate how good is, I guess, but you don't spell it out, maybe, but this is what it seems to me. We find suffering much more interesting. Happiness less memorable in our society? Well, I don't think that happiness should be memorable, because if we say that life is such a great thing, happiness probably should be all around us, right? If you say that, we hear on the news, or all around from um, history of some sort of tragedies, and we are always reminded of the tragedies, but we're not reminded of happiness. Well, what miserable a world must be if we have to be reminded of happiness. Okay, we're supposed to be having fun and joy in every day of our lives, right? If this life is such a great thing, we shouldn't be reminded of happiness. It should just flow like a river. And we are reminded of suffering because, well, life is so great, so we have to actually remind ourselves of suffering. But it's not the case, I don't think, right? And I don't actually think that we are so that we hear about suffering too often, well, unless you only mean news on TV. Yeah, you turn on the news and they tell you about the problems, and they commemorate some date, something horrible happened. We need to learn from history. We need to, remember to keep our nuclear plants safe. Just like a couple of days ago, there was commemoration of Chernobyl explosion 26 years ago. So I think that's a normal thing. But the other time on TV, all you see is entertainment, entertainment, entertainment. Joy, happiness, singing, some sort of quizzes, some competitions, some talentless idiots showing off, and all that sort of crap. And I don't see them going into hospitals and showing to people how many people are actually suffering at the same moment. No, we are trying to multiply happiness all the time. We're trying to stress on the good side of life. So don't tell me that, we are we are drowning in the reports of the suffering. If they just went to some hospice or some cancer clinic and interview the patients and film what the patients are going through every moment of their lives, and it will be aired for half a day, and the other half of the day it would be just happy programs. We should see how that would go. Actually, that would probably be something more balanced, because otherwise all I see is Teletubbies dancing on TV. um, Next, let's get back to my notes. We are bad at judging mental states of people. Yeah, um, I don't have a big issue with that, but not always. I mean, if somebody is in agony and just twitching on the floor and screaming and help me, sometimes it's quite an obvious bad mental state of a person. So extremes are pretty understandable. Usually it's just something in the middle, somebody sitting with a dumb face, maybe they're suffering, and maybe they're just dumb, or maybe they're meditating, or maybe they're sleeping with their eyes open. Quite a nice ability. Then you can have a day job and pretend like you're actually working or waiting for the work to be done, but you're sleeping. So good. But getting back to the subject, yeah. So I guess you're hinting on the fact, or maybe you mentioned it, I don't know, is that we actually judge people and judge them to be worse off than they actually are when we look at them, right? Um, well, the same can be said then the other way. We could say that, yeah, and you made an example that we judge like rich people, that we think that they are very happy, and in fact they commit suicide, so maybe they weren't so happy. Yeah, we suck at that, but I guess you were trying to make a point there that we see much more, again, negative than there actually is in life, and that just doesn't sound right. We are wired to see less negative and more positive, um, because that's adaptationally advantageous. If you see more crap, you're always down, and you can't go through your life and be healthy and happy and whatnot. So we're trying to point our attention towards the things that make us feel good. Um, um, who said that? Who was that? Zapfe? I guess I'll just post this quote here, that we thrive only by limiting the content of our consciousness. We survive by limiting the content of our consciousness, so we don't let the information that disturbs us overwhelm us. We actually concentrate on the positive. Brain actually, in many people at least, is wired to reject negative thoughts. We really suck at predicting how bad our life can get. What are the odds of us getting a serious disease, or get into some other kind of trouble? We routinely underestimate that. So we are actually wired to diminish the possible negatives and expect a better outcome, which is probably what you're doing now. Okay, so, and then I just love this phrase. Okay. So you say that there's some profound arrogance in the notion that you really know enough about the world and everyone's intimate mental lives to say with confidence that they would have been better off to have never been born in the first place. Well, you say it's a profound arrogance to say that somebody would have been better off that they if they never existed. Well, I see it in completely opposite way. I think that it's a profound arrogance to state that you know better that somebody should be born without actually knowing what's gonna happen to that person. It is arrogance to say that you know better that people should exist. Because in my case, I'm not saying somebody should die. I'm not saying somebody should commit suicide. I'm not saying that somebody's yours or other people's who exist today should value their life in some way, negatively or something. All I'm saying is, in fact, you can only speak for yourself, and you can only decide for yourself whether you like this life or not. But when you create in another person, you are deciding for that person that this life is good enough for them, that these circumstances that you are putting them in will be good enough for them, that whatever will happen to that person in the course of their lifetime, or which you have no ways of knowing, will be good enough. And I just think this is where the profound arrogance lies. Then you say that people seem to prefer almost any kind of life to the alternative. Well, I spoke about that in my video entitled Life is a Trap, or whatever. I don't really remember what specifically I name my videos and say in my videos, because I don't make a transcript or anything, just talk. Except one video, I guess. Yeah. And at least one half of the one video. Yeah, I'm being boring. Okay, so when people are trapped and they have no way, no acceptable for them way of changing the situation that they're in, they will learn to adapt and love the situation they're in, because there is no other choice. If you're in jail, first, you will be very sad and miserable, but then you will realize you're trapped. You can't stay here and survive another, whatever your term is, a decade or even 5 years, if you're going to be miserable every day, crying over it, and having a panic and whatever. You have to calm down and learn to pay attention to what little good is available to you to make your existence less miserable and more bearable. That's what people are doing with their lives. And religion helps a lot actually in those cases, because it promises people, if your life is shitty, this life you will have something else in after you die. So that consoles a lot of people. And almost nobody will say to you that I hate my life, because it's really big burden to live with the realization that you only stay alive because you're afraid to die right now, or because you don't want to die because you don't want to upset your loved ones, but basically you would have preferred not to have been. That's a very tough realization to have, and people avoid that. People routinely avoid stuff, realizing and keeping in the consciousness stuff that hurts them. They repress the feelings, forget the thoughts, and put it in the subconscious. So yeah, it's no wonder that people who at some point realize that their life is shit and it's not getting any better, don't live with that realization, with that conscious realization. They get rid of it, and they try to believe in a delusion that makes them happy, because they are not ready, they are unwilling to commit suicide, and what good would it do to live in constant misery? And then again, in your conclusion, you say whether life is a net positive or negative is unknown, and so what reason do we have to end life on earth? And I'm saying, what reason do we have to continue it if we don't know shit? As I was talking about this subject in my previous video, if you don't know enough, or if you don't know everything about life, what are your reasons for perpetuating it? Shouldn't you know more before you take action than when you just abstain from action? You should know more before you create another person who may not like it here. It's for you to know more. It's not for us to know more. We don't need to know more to say, don't conduct this experiment and don't gamble with somebody else's future life. Okay? I don't need to know whether life is a net positive or negative, because when I don't act, I don't deprive anybody of anything. I don't deprive a future being of future happiness, because that being does not exist and will never exist, because I will not act. It's impossible to harm the non-existence. It's also impossible to benefit the non-existence. But it's possible to bring somebody into existence and harm them. And that's what people are doing by procreating. They enable the possibility of harm by creating the vulnerable sentient being that is capable of experiencing harm. Antinatalism is just saying, what are your reasons for doing that? Because you're not creating yourself. So what are your reasons for creating somebody else who never asked for anything? Even if there was more, a lot more positive than negative in it, I would still pay attention to the individuals. The individual matters for me, because I fail to understand how the well-being of one individual loses its value only because there are many more individuals who are sort of not in the same boat with that person. So in other words, would you create the world of many, many, many happy, tremendously happy people if the condition was simultaneously you create one person who will suffer tremendously throughout the whole life, who will be tortured and suffer and scream and cry, and nobody will comfort that person? It will be tremendous suffering. But there will be, name any number, 100,000, 1 million. If you say you're gonna create 1 million, 3 gazillions happy people at the cost of one suffering person, I'll say this is a crime. This is something you should not do, because non-existence is not a problem. Those millions of people would not have been harmed by not being created. If you would have never created them, they wouldn't have noticed. They wouldn't have noticed that they do not exist. But you created one person who will suffer needlessly, who also never needed anything, never did anything wrong, never harmed anybody, but you created that person, and that person will suffer. And maybe that's just one little person in comparison to the whole world, but for that one person, this is the whole world. This experience that they're gonna have, this horrific experience, will be all they will ever see. This will be their whole world. It doesn't matter that the millions of people will be dancing and having wild sex and singing and eating a lot of pizza. It doesn't mean anything, because if they wouldn't exist, it would be fine. I mean, and you create a unit of suffering for no good reason. I would say no amount of happiness can compensate for one unhappy, shitty life. What reason, what right do you have to create that shitty life? What's your justification? That happiness that never needed to exist? I don't think so. So what's the justification for continuing life on Earth? Why should people be born here who will suffer tremendously? I don't care if they comprise only 1% of the whole. I know I wouldn't like to be that 1%. And I wouldn't like my loved ones to be in that 1%. And I would never have said that, okay, just because my loved one comprises only 1% of the whole people, let my loved one be tortured, just so you can have happiness. I would never say that. If I wouldn't have said that for myself and for my loved ones, I should just be fair and say nobody should be sentenced to that, because we're all equal. Yeah. Okay. Well, so I hope I expressed my position about suffering. I don't count, I don't count it in units or whatever on the balance, because I don't think we're just mathematics. There's non-existence, and non-existence is not a problem, but existence is very problematic, and that's why we have to even talk about it, because we exist. But we're gonna get back to non-existence, me and you and everybody else who are here. And when we talk about extinction, it's not like something drastic is gonna happen. It's just, what's going to happen is what's happening every day. People will die. People are dying every day. That's all we've been doing here. It's nothing new. It's just that new people who never asked to be born will not be born to die another day. That's the whole difference, you know. Oh, whatever. Okay, it's enough. I'm sorry I'm always making kind of long videos, but so yeah, because I still have a lot to say, but I can't be saying it all in one video, and I need to clean the house. It's a mess. But good news is I'm gonna be moving from this dump, because I hated it, because this is a shitty apartment, because my neighbors suck and they should never have existed. That's for sure. Dumbass. Okay, have a nice day. Be kind to your neighbors. Don't procreate. Bye.